Yeah, I should have emailed. It was off LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh, how are you?
We'll say
Yeah.
That's on the second. Good morning, everyone. We're going to be starting promptly in 2 minutes, so please grab your food, grab a coffee refill, and take a seat. Thank you. 2 minutes. Okay, welcome everyone. Please have a seat. Let's get started. Welcome to PGP, Pretty Good Policy for Crypto. I'm Paul Brigner. I'm the organizer, and I'm also the Vice President of Strategic Alliances at the Electric Coin Company, the developers of Zcash. We are here today to share information, build a stronger crypto policy community, and talk about pretty good policy for crypto. If you don't know what PGP stands for, please ask a neighbor who's been here before. There's meaning there that we'd like for you to understand. Thank you for being here and being a part of the crypto community. This is amazing, standing room only crowd. I love it. I want to thank our supporters and sponsors, including Coinbase, the Blockchain Association, Electric Coin Company, and of course, this beautiful venue is made possible by the University of Southern California Capitol Campus and the VanEck Digital Assets Initiative at the USC Marshall School of Business. I'm going to cut my opening short because our sponsor is Coinbase, and they are here to give a talk before he runs off to the hill to do important work. So, Robin Cook, I want to thank you for being here and thank Coinbase for supporting this initiative. Please tell us what you're up to and open this with a discussion about stablecoins, right? That's our topic of the day.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Well, good morning, and thank you guys for coming out this morning and for having me here. This is a truly, I think, exciting time in crypto, period. But to be working on crypto policy is truly a privilege that I think we should all take a moment to really appreciate. We have right now a opportunity that just doesn't come along very often in a career. There is usually once a decade that you get a major piece of financial services legislation, and this decade it's going to be crypto. And let that sink in about how far this industry has come and what the opportunities that represents in terms of providing the certainty to our community, to our builders, to know that if they're bringing something from their head into the world, that they know that they're going to have the ability to then turn it around and bring it to market. This is a situation that we haven't had for the last entire existence of the industry, really, but certainly for the last 4 years. And we're going to be turning the corner and never coming back as an industry, which is really, truly exciting. I just wanted to quickly touch on a couple of things just to set the table for the day. So first of all, I think it's really easy to fall into the weeds in terms of stablecoins and market structure, but there's really a lot of alignment, more alignment than there is disagreement on what the substance of these legislative vehicles should look like at the end of the day. And so just wanted to set a couple of issues out just to set the table for the day. Whenever we talk to our executive team about legislation, we always start with this slide because it really is not super complicated what we're asking Congress to do. We need a stablecoin bill, which we're going to talk about today. We need a market structure for digital commodities, everything that is not a security. And we need the ability for there to be a digital securities market in the United States, which we know exists around the world, and we know that there's a desire to do in the United States. We need Congress to provide those tools to be able to get there. And I think if you think about each of those puzzle pieces one by one, we've got stablecoin that we're 97% of the way there. We've got digital commodities that we're probably 94 or 95% of the way there. And then we've got digital securities that I think that there really is a broad agreement that is forming across the industry in terms of what those pieces look like. And so we've just got to be able to get it done. So next slide, just real quickly, I thought I'd kind of set the table for what we see in the stablecoin bills that are currently being debated on the Hill. Both of them have the OCC as a regulator, which is really exciting. That's better than where we've been the last couple of years, where there has been the risk of the Federal Reserve coming in and effectively making a bank-only market through a regulatory process. There's a much better reason to be confident with the Fed. You've got an ability for both banks and non-banks to be in the market. By the way, the fact that banks can be here is a good thing because of the fact that you have once they enter the market themselves, things like debanking risk go away pretty quickly if they're actually participating in this marketplace. There are some questions that still need to be figured out. What do you do about offshore stablecoins? I'm sure that's going to be a major part of the conversation today. It's certainly a major question mark in terms of how we're going to be addressing this from a policy perspective, given that both the House and the Senate take very divergent paths in terms of dealing with that. There's, I think, a question of whether there should be a separation of banking and commerce that's applied. We have pretty deep concerns about that. If you think about the reason why those provisions exist for banks, it's deposit insurance that nobody's talking about here. It's federal, access to things like the discount window that probably aren't very realistic here. But what it could mean is effectively a backdoor to a bank-only stablecoin market if it's done wrong, and so we're pretty concerned about that. And then I think there's a question of custody requirements. So the fact that these bills are moving separately creates sort of some questions about how you're going to be custodying stablecoins because of the fact that they're not moving side by side with a market structure package. Hopefully those questions can be answered through market structure, but there are, I think, some issues that really need to be thought through just from a stablecoin perspective in terms of how to make those provisions actually work. But we shouldn't lose the forest for the trees here, because these are solvable problems. And the fact of the matter is, we do have the political will to get something done and to have it happen this year. And it is truly an exciting opportunity. What we have to do to make that happen is to continue to lend our voices, to continue to show up at events like this, to continue to talk to the Hill, to continue to remind them of the need to pass legislation that will both enable consumers to be protected, but enable the industry to have the certainty that it has been calling for the longest time. It is a really unusual situation that you have an industry that is standing there waving their hands, please regulate us. And we now have the opportunity to get that done and to pass a bill that hopefully will last for, outlive all of us, which would be a truly exciting opportunity. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for having these conversations. It's important to be, the details matter, and forums like this are a really good place to share those details. And we're excited to work with everyone to get this done. So thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Robin. Now, off to the Hill with you, and keep up the good work. We so appreciate all of your support and all that you do to help us move this industry forward. Okay, so a couple more comments to open the meeting here, since I had to cut short just to make sure that Robin was able to speak to us. To ensure you're notified of future meetings, please subscribe to our Luma calendar. It's lu.ma/PGP for crypto. You can see the whole calendar for the rest of the year. I want to thank some of you for registering on-chain with Base, another nod to our sponsor Coinbase. You are the lucky first recipients of a PGP NFT that will unlock PGP community benefits down the line. So if you missed that opportunity, be sure to grab it next time. And finally, one more reminder for your calendar. The 2025 DC Privacy Summit is scheduled for October 16th, so please save the date. Mark that date on your calendar. We will be sending out, it's October 16th, and we will be sending out information on that very soon. Today, I want to take an organizer's prerogative to share my views on an important crypto policy topic. And I don't do this often, so I'd only do it if I felt it were critically important. As you all are aware, today is our stablecoin day. Our general focus today is on stablecoins, and that's what our panel's on, confidential stablecoins. And you're going to hear why confidential stablecoins are so important to the cryptocurrency industry. Stablecoin legislation, as you just heard, is moving quickly through Congress with the Stable Act scheduled to be addressed in the House this next week, in the Financial Services Committee, and then the Genius Act is already out of the Senate Banking Committee. Of course, this is amazing progress, very exciting, but my grave concern is that these bills do not specifically allow for confidential or shielded stablecoins. And if Congress doesn't express its opinion now, I am concerned regulators will not permit confidential stablecoins to be issued. So as you listen to the panel discussion today, keep this in mind. In my view, having confidential stablecoins is absolutely necessary to update the financial system with cryptocurrency. So let's all try to make that happen in the very near term. All right, so moving forward with our program, I want to move now to Miles Jennings. He's online, couldn't be here today in person, but he's remote. We're very lucky to have him. He's such a busy guy. Recently promoted to head of policy at A16Z Crypto, and I have been watching some of the things he's been doing recently. If you don't follow him, you should. Just one thing after another, like putting out really good frameworks that we should all be paying attention to. So I'm sure he's going to talk about some of that. So let's go to our online Zoom with Miles Jennings. We don't hear Miles yet, so let's make sure he's. Are you unmuted, Miles?
I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, so let's check with RAV.
Um,
Yeah, we hear you now, Miles. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right, great. And I have a presentation that I pulled together, so I'm gonna bring that up.
Great, thank you.
Let's see. All right. Okay. So hi, I'm Miles Jennings. I'm head of policy and general counsel at A16Z Crypto. I've been here for about 4 years now, and prior to that, I was a partner at Latham and Watkins. So in my role here, I spend a lot of time together with our engineers and our research team, working with a lot of entrepreneurs on how to build their projects. A key part of that is always kind of dealing with tokens. And so for a long time, we've used kind of a taxonomy internally with our portfolio and trying to help them navigate, exactly what it was that they were trying to accomplish with their token. We finally kind of put that out in public a couple of weeks ago, with the taxonomy really trying to focus on both looking at all of this from a legal perspective, from an engineering perspective, and from an economics perspective. With the goal then being that it's kind of consistent with some of the policy work that we've done on kind of defining decentralization, which we've kind of proposed that should be focused on whether or not these systems are controlled, as opposed to the SEC's 2019 framework, which really looked at whether or not entrepreneurs were engaging in ongoing efforts. Moving the kind of decentralization analysis to something that's purely focused on control as opposed to focusing on ongoing efforts makes it a lot easier to categorize tokens, because it gives you a little bit clearer lines as to where a token might derive its value from something that is controlled versus something that is not controlled, like a permissionless autonomous blockchain. So I'll get into it here, and this is all obviously kind of helpful and informative for the market structure piece of the legislation. And while there's not a ton of about stablecoins in here, there is a brief bit. So I'll dive in. Okay, so the first category we have are just security tokens, and this is what Robin was just speaking to. That was the kind of piece in the middle, which is that we do need legislation around digital securities that would enable you to basically take a share of stock and issue it on chain and have that trade permissionlessly on chain. And so these are just traditional forms of securities that are moved on chain. Obviously, their treatment is going to be subject to securities laws. And we're not proposing that they have a kind of different path, but the idea is that through legislation we can kind of come up with a framework that allows these things to trade on chain, as opposed to having to trade through intermediaries like brokers and transfer agents. Next category is network tokens. This is the most critical category from our perspective and what we're most focused on investing in. These are speculative assets that are intrinsically linked to and derive their value from the programmatic functioning of a blockchain or smart contract protocol. So think Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Uniswap, even Doge, which started out as a meme coin, is technically a network token because it does have its own network. So I think that the critical thing here, right, is that these things often, have embedded utility, but that doesn't necessarily kind of exclude them from securities laws. And the final piece here is that we're really focused on the economic mechanisms that these protocols use, and that's one of the critical components for figuring out, basically whether or not its value is being derived from something that is controlled by humans versus not. So in the case of like Ethereum, right, this comes up with EIP 1559, where every time a transaction happens on Ethereum, a portion of ETH is burned, which results in overall economic value accruing to token holders. So you see that in a lot of layer ones. At application levels, like with respect to Uniswap, it's been a little bit more of a struggle to get that type of economic value accrual mechanism in place. One of the reasons for that is that the SEC kind of targeted that activity as being more indicative, framing it as being more indicative of there being a potential securities transaction. And so that's one of the things that we're hoping that the SEC kind of moves away from now, because ultimately, if these tokens don't have economic value accruing to them, then it's hard to distinguish them from meme coins. And from our perspective, we think that that's one of the reasons that a lot of people have moved towards the meme coin and sector of the industry, because ultimately it's been harder to distinguish value accrual of ordinary tokens from meme coins. All right, so then there's company-backed tokens. The most prominent example of this is FTT. So these are basically speculative assets. They can look like network tokens, right? They can use a blockchain to facilitate payments. But at the end of the day, their value is totally derived from a system that is controlled by a company. So for instance, in the case of FTT, right, all of the value of that token was derived from FTX operating its exchange. And that was obviously a centralized business that was operating. And what they would do is they would take the profits of kind of operating that exchange and promise to the market that they would then take a portion of those profits, buy back FTT and burn it, right? Thereby kind of closing the economic loop of that system. So it's very critical to be able to distinguish between a network token and a company-backed token, because a company-backed token looks very much like a profits interest in a company. There's no decentralization. So it has all of the trust dependencies that an ordinary security does, right? It just doesn't have a legal relationship embedded in the actual token itself. But again, given that all the trust dependencies are very similar to a security, it makes sense to treat these, similarly to securities law or how we treat securities. Now, a great example of this, right, was when FTX collapsed, right? The price of FTT basically went to zero. So that is something that we, want to very clearly distinguish with our entrepreneurs, right? And we try to direct them towards building network tokens as opposed to company-backed tokens, which we think are mostly regulatory arbitrage at this point. Now, the key kind of distinguish between a company-backed token and a network token, right? It can be difficult because these things can be very complex and you can have value accruing from multiple sources. But essentially, we look at really three things to distinguish company-backed tokens from network tokens. One is the network open, right? And so that means, can anyone build on top of it? Is it totally permissionless? So in the case of Ethereum, anyone can deploy a smart contract. In the case of Uniswap, anyone can put a front end that accesses the protocol. Do the network effects accrue to the protocol and token holders, right? Or do they accrue to some centralized company? In the case of Ethereum, right, the network effects of the system accrue to ETH token holders. That's the way that the economic model works. In the case of FTX, right, all of the network effects accrued to FTX, right, because if they just shut down their system, the token would go to zero. There was no network there, right? So as a result of that, the network effects were accruing to FTX, which makes it more like a company-backed token. And then you look at whether or not it's enabled, the token is enabled to basically accrue economic value independent of the devco. Again, in the case of Ethereum, that happens naturally by the way that the blockchain functions. In the case of FTT, that did not happen without the FTX roll, which again, when FTX collapsed, the price of the token also collapsed. The last are a little bit more straightforward. So arcade tokens, think of these like mileage points or reward points. They're basically currencies within usually within a closed system that an issuer uses to basically control a digital economy. So this could be digital gold in a video game, right? Or it could be loyalty points. One exciting example out there right now is Blackbird's Fly. Blackbird is a network that connects a lot of restaurants. And Fly token is a token that is like a rewards point within that system that enables people to earn those rewards, but then also spend them on meals at the restaurants that participate in the network. These are mostly generally not securities because they are not speculative and people are not investing in them. And so these are really true utility tokens. Collectible tokens, these are most often called NFTs, right? These are assets that kind of derive their value from being a record of ownership of some tangible or intangible good. So think art, music, membership in a club, or some type of game asset. Typically, non-fungible, so they're always called kind of NFTs, and their treatment is still subject to securities laws, as we've seen over the last few years. But we're hoping that the SEC kind of makes some progress in drawing some clear lines for entrepreneurs and creators. And then asset-backed tokens. So these are basically assets that derive their value from a claim on or economic exposure to one or more underlying assets. So this is where you would have stable coins, right? A stable coin is essentially just a deposit receipt on an underlying piece of collateral. So in the case of USDC, that's treasuries. And so ultimately, right, these tokens, when you're looking at their overall risk profile, you have to look at the risk of the underlying collateral, as well as kind of the issuer of the asset-backed token itself and what they're doing. That also kind of includes liquid staking tokens, as well as derivatives. So this is an area where we've seen quite a bit of activity, but not something that we've seen kind of clear definitive guidance from the SEC on, and that's another area where we're continuing to push. And then finally, meme coins, which, I think one of the frustrating things over the course of the last year has been that a lot of entrepreneurs come to us and will say, hey, we want to do a meme coin. And then they'll describe something that is really not a meme coin. And so you see this kind of all of the time. And it's been, a fairly difficult narrative over the course of the last year. But inherently, right, there's nothing wrong with meme coins when they're actually truly meme coins, which is that, they have no intrinsic utility or value. They're tied to an internet meme, right? Community driven network, right? As opposed to, someone launching a meme coin that is tied to a company, right? That kind of breaks the inherent qualities of meme coins that make them not subject to securities laws. As a result of that, right, we also see a lot of kind of market manipulation and fraud in this space, which has generally been, not a positive development over the last year. But hopefully, I think the SEC's recent guidance on this, clearly delineated what meme coins are versus what they are not, and so we're hoping that is going to be helpful. So finally, just a quick summary chart here. Right, I think most of these, types of tokens can be offered in securities transactions under Howey. So you do have to kind of look at the nature of the offer. I think, company-backed tokens are much more similar to, they're basically proxies for securities. So we think that securities laws should delineate between company-backed tokens like FTT versus network tokens like, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Failure to distinguish those things really would lead to, the ability to securitize any product without being subject to securities laws. So that's not, not something that we think would be great. So I think that in market structure legislation, which again was what Robin was talking about as well, that there needs to be a very clear focus on delineating between, network tokens and company-backed tokens, so that, any legislation that we do pass for digital assets doesn't end up becoming a workaround for, for securities laws. Ultimately, right, network tokens can eliminate the trust dependencies that securities are subject to, whereas company-backed tokens can't. So we do think that that's a pretty clear line that needs to be drawn. All right, that's all I got.
Thank you, Miles. Well, I don't know if you can see it, but we have a full room here, and that was fascinating. I really loved it. When I saw that Miles put out this framework, it reminded me of back to the earliest days when I started working in crypto, kind of like right before the ICO boom, and we were really struggling with token taxonomies, and that was like a huge topic. And you see it pop up periodically as time has passed, and to see this, and I thought, wow, another token taxonomy. Well, why do we do this? It's because this industry is rapidly evolving, and as the technology changes and our business models change, we have to reevaluate this. So I was really pleased to see this model that I think is very simple and straightforward, and it's critically important to have something like this to take to policymakers and regulators to help them understand this industry, to put these tokens into buckets that are somewhat familiar, that we can all figure out how to deal with from a legal perspective. So Miles, thank you for your leadership. Good luck in the new role, and we look forward to having you back again soon.
Awesome. Thanks all. Bye.
Take care. All right, now we have a couple of in-person speakers. Some people I look up to very much, and some of my best heroes in the industry. We have Miller Whitehouse Levine and Amanda Tuminelli of DeFi Education Fund. They're going to tell you about some exciting developments in that group. So where are you guys at? Please come up. Just to get the next group ready to go, we're going to have Matt from Bitcoin Policy Institute.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having us. My name is Miller Whitehouse Levine. Amanda and I are at the DeFi Education Fund. We do policy and advocacy work on behalf of DeFi developers and users. Have been going at it for about 4 years now. I know I just introduced myself, but we are here to share the news that I am stepping down from my position at the DeFi Education Fund and am joining the board. The good news is that Amanda is taking over, so we've got a bigger brain that's going to be advocating on behalf of DeFi full time, which I am very excited about.
Thanks, Miller. We obviously would not be here without Miller, and that's why we're not letting him go very far. And he has already joined the board and is going to stay very close physically in our office. So we will still benefit from all of his insight. For those of us for those of you who don't know what we do, we, as Miller said, we advocate for DeFi. We advocate for sound DeFi policy that can look like in the past impact litigation, probably less of that going forward now that there is a friendlier environment. So going forward, more comment letters on proposed rulemaking, working directly with legislators on proposed legislation. As the first two speakers today talked about, we are very involved in market structure legislation in order to protect DeFi and make sure that it does not inadvertently ban DeFi or overly burden DeFi development. And we also work directly with DeFi developers. One of our top policy priorities going forward is related to Section 1960, which is the criminal law that punishes running an unlicensed money transmitting business. That is the statute at heart of the Tornado Cash case and also the Samurai Wallet case. And although there is a friendlier administrative environment for market structure and legislation, DOJ has not stopped. DOJ is still pursuing criminal cases against individual software developers, and that is very concerning to us. We are meeting with members of Congress about this all the time. I wrote a paper with Jake Chervinsky and Dan Barabender talking about Section 1960. And there was a recent win on Friday. Treasury removed sanctions from Tornado Cash, but it is not the total win that crypto Twitter would have you believe. They did not remove sanctions on the software developer Roman Semenov of Tornado Cash. He is still sanctioned. And although they exercised their discretion to remove sanctions on the website and the smart contracts, that does not mean they cannot reissue sanctions later under the DPRK program. So while it is, of course, a win and a step in the right direction, I would just say that there is more work to be done, and we plan to keep doing it. So we would love to work with any and all of you. We care about software developers, we care about DeFi, and we hope that you also will keep DeFi in mind when you are working with this administration to create durable wins for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, Matt, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Matthew Pines. I'm the newly installed executive director of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I've been proud to become a leader there, but I've been supporting them as a national security fellow since they got started as essentially a glorified blog about 4 years ago by some intrepid young Bitcoiners named David Zell and Grant McCarty, who had the idea that there should be a Bitcoin-specific think tank providing rigorous sort of peer review quality research and advocacy for Bitcoin in the nation's capital. And so I'm proud to kind of help them take on this next evolution in the organization. They're now 10 full-time staff based in DC. We'll be opening up a physical office in partnership with PubKey over the course of the summer. So that will be a really interesting venue to host kind of casual events, happy hours, as well as a more structured events, panel discussions, kind of a regular almost like Bitcoin embassy, kind of cultural, bring DC to Bitcoin, bring sort of Bitcoin to DC type of gathering spot in Penn Quarter. Bitcoin Policy Institute really stands to provide, kind of advocacy on Bitcoin and open monetary networks as they take kind of strategic value in the 21st century. So our main policy focus areas are the intersection of Bitcoin, national security, and geopolitics, which is now, I think, less of a hypothetical question than it was a few years ago, as the president has specifically designated Bitcoin as digital gold and has sent a signal around the world that they intend to hold it as a strategic asset. Other countries will study that, and that might lead to second-order effects. We also look at Bitcoin in intersection with our human rights commitments around the world and commitments to financial inclusion and how these open monetary networks can help spread our values. We also spend a lot of time looking at the intersection of Bitcoin, the energy system, emerging technologies like AI, and our climate goals. Bitcoin mining in particular is a pretty fast developing domestic and global industry. It's going to have a lot of second order effects on how we think about the energy grid and the intersection with AI. And lastly, we also think about the future of money itself and these different technologies as they kind of create a more kind of integrated ecosystem with traditional finance. Those are going to have both kind of regulatory issues that we talked about today, but also more global issues that span kind of the competition for money. How we think about the legacy system that has been built over the last few decades and kind of the geopolitical competition over monetary networks are now going to have a major impact on what we think about the relationship between the citizen and the state, not just in the US, but around the world. So really excited to help kind of steer this organization in the next few months. It's kind of a unique moment in time where the aperture for policy on this area has never been wider. And so we hope to kind of land things by the end of the year, I think, in a good spot. We're going to be organizing a wide range of different activities and events throughout the year. We just had a Bitcoin for America forum a few weeks ago that was really successful. And then our main sort of flagship summit is going to be in June, so June 25th. Really encourage anyone to register for that. We'll be sending out more information about how to participate. Really want to make that kind of a landmark event to really drive Bitcoin-specific policy in the nation's capital. So please get involved. Reach out to me, again, Matthew Pines, as well as I have a colleague of mine, Rebecca Groom, over there, who leads our external affairs. And so we really want to partner with everyone that's involved in this space. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, I would highly recommend the Bitcoin Policy Summit. In my view, it's a must-attend event, so mark your calendars for that. Okay, I think that was June 25th. Is that what you said? June 25th, yes, June 25th. I would now like to welcome a good friend, and I don't say this lightly because I know there's just a ton of super smart people in the crypto ecosystem. Well, this guy is probably the smartest crypto guy I know. So I'm so happy to have him here. He's in town just for a short time. Blake Benthal of FathomX. Blake.
Thank you, Paul. Wow, what an intro. I've been watching these online for quite a while, and it's an honor to be here, honor to see lots of people in the room. Thank you for your advocacy to help cryptocurrency to be safe to innovate on in America. I have a weird backstory I'll get into in a second, but I firmly believe that cryptocurrency will go mainstream. It's inevitable, and that at some point, every business will have cryptocurrency on its balance sheet. But for that to be possible, we have two table stakes we really need to be building towards. We need honest accounting. We can't have another FTX. It really shouldn't be possible to have another FTX, because ideally we should be building on fully auditable blockchains and technologies. So honest accounting, but we also need privacy. Think of the way that people tend to pay when they want privacy. And the reality today is that's cash. And kind of the bar that we need to meet as an industry is for the use cases of cash to be fully blessed from a regulatory standpoint with cryptocurrency. So backdoors and the types of traceability that is often talked about don't really exist for cash. And I think we really should be reminding ourselves that that's in many ways the killer app. So we need honesty and privacy in our ecosystem. So I'm building FathomX. FathomX is free accounting software when a business decides to accept cryptocurrency. We make it really easy for businesses to flip that switch and explain cryptocurrency to their accounting teams. Crypto is not scary. Like a lot of the messaging in media has been, well, really our reputation as an industry has been that cryptocurrency is for scams. It's for people hiding from the law. And it's a really dangerous tech. So I'm building to help businesses accept crypto, but also to educate businesses on how little privacy they have when using most cryptocurrencies. Privacy is normal. I love the tagline Paul's worked towards for years. And I think America's brand as a country of liberty is important to remember too, because liberty means privacy. I have no doubt in my mind that if hundreds of years ago, the colonies here, if all of their financial transactions had been public to England, I don't think we'd have a country today. So that's the kind of financial oppression that a lot of the mainstream cryptocurrencies of today will enable if we don't build in privacy tech now. Personally, like I'm a contributor to Zcash, and I'm a huge fan of privacy currencies like Zcash and Monero. I don't see privacy as evil or an indicator that someone's doing criminal things. I see privacy tech as the same as cash. So I mentioned I had a weird background. 10 years ago, I made a huge life mistake. I saw the federal government take down the Silk Road 1 darknet drug marketplace. And at age 25, I had the terrible idea to rebuild and to relaunch it. So I ran Silk Road 2 for 1 year and met my government a year later. So I was arrested by the FBI, and through my parents pouring their retirement into my legal defense and me being an inmate pitching like crazy, like, hey, let me write code, let me contribute in any way possible rather than spending the rest of my life in jail. I'm incredibly thankful that great people in the US government opted to give me a second chance. And I ended up spending 8 months in jail and being given a really rare opportunity to collaborate with federal law enforcement for nearly a decade, where I helped on cryptocurrency investigations. So I've seen where crypto can go wrong, both in my personal life as a Bitcoiner from 2013, but I've also seen where interacting with the enforcers and the regulators of your country can lead to great outcomes. So thank you again to everyone here interacting here in DC with the United States of America. And I think we have a really bright time ahead of us. It's not too late to build in cryptocurrency. We're just getting started. And yeah, I believe everyone should be honest with crypto, and we should support privacy technologies because privacy is normal. It's no different from cash. And in reality, no business is going to accept cryptocurrency if their entire transaction history of all their customers, all their employees is public to every counterparty. So thank you for your time. I'm around for any questions. And thank you to Paul and Mike for organizing this.
I tell you, it's a rare treat to have Blake here. If you want to know more about Blake, there's a full feature in the New York Times that you could look up. Blake Benthal's quite an amazing story, and just so glad to see, all the productive things that are happening in his life and everything good that he's doing. All right, let's move on. Robert Reuter from the IDI. Can I have, come on, please, Robert.
Hey, thank you, Paul. It's good to see everyone in the room. I know that we're running tight on time, so I'm going to be doing a really quick update on the presentation that I gave a few months back. So I like to give sneak previews to the audience that's here in this room and joining us online into what we're up to at IDI. Last time that we spoke, we were talking about DARPI, a Digital Asset Research for Policy initiative. And with grants and resources and support from USC Beta, VanEck, EY, we are actually starting to move forward with some applied research where we can start evolving the industry's theoretical use cases into applied case studies. So we partnered with Starling Lab for data integrity. Starling Lab, it's a collaboration between USC Libraries and Stanford's Electrical Engineering Department. And what we're doing is we are looking to tokenize cultural artifacts, to sign and register those tokens across several blockchains, and then to store those in a decentralized fashion to effectively delete the delete button for some of the most important components of human history. Effectively, what it boils down to is we need to ensure provenance, we need to ensure persistence, and we need to ensure permissionless access to the stories that are told by the humans that have lived them. So with that being said, we look forward to providing insights from those case studies to this room and look forward to partnering with the folks in this room to expand this project. Imagine for a moment that every time you walk through a museum and you looked at an artifact, that there was a payment made to the folks that contributed that artifact. Now, ultimately, what this is building towards is a more full, decentralized public utility for data, where we can start looking at personal data and private data to inform an application layer without exposing our data to those applications themselves. We're beginning with public information because the privacy requirements are the least in that space, and it will allow us to not only protect and preserve that culture, but also to explore an application layer that may be informed by that arts and culture. So again, imagining an AI, imagining an application layer that is informed by the human experience, and that we can ultimately use to drive personal and private data to an application layer without the exposure or surrender of that data. Now, total side note, we are going to be doing a larger unveiling of this at Consensus 2025 in Toronto. As a nonprofit, donors of a certain degree to our nonprofit do receive 90% off of those Consensus badges. So if anyone is interested in attending Consensus, if anyone would like to learn more about these cultural preservation efforts and ultimately the larger vision of this program within DARPy, please catch up with me or shoot me an email at the email on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, I have to apologize. We have so much information to pack in that we are totally blowing through your break that we had planned. So if you need extra coffee, you're just going to have to get up quietly and go get it or get more food or anything like that. We are just going to drive through. We have one more lightning talk speaker who's going to be Alex Chiswick, and then we're going to go into our panel. So Alex, please. He's got the slides. You just have to tell him.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
And Alex, yeah, here we got your slides.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Alex Chiswick from Harris X. We're a marketing and executive strategy company. I've been in the space for 10 years. Many of you know me. I was at OKX, did listings there, was an executive there, as well as the digital chamber. I run, again, this marketing executive research company. We do work with product work at deep levels with Apple, Samsung, Musk and the X, his X platform, and as well as others. And in the space, we've done work with the BA, Consensus, Bitcoin Magazine, OKX. I wanted to introduce something that I would love to launch with Paul. We've did a monthly or a crypto index, crypto confidence index, and I don't know who has the slides. We'll just go a couple next slides because it's one more. One more. Thank you. I wanted to show you this because as the policy winds have shifted, and this is a really quick look, we're seeing a lot of people actually starting to take up crypto. So on the right-hand side, you see crypto investors, and left-hand side, you see general public. The point is people want to invest, but we have a major problem as a space, and this is what I would love to be able to help people with. So if we go to the next slide, the TLDR is we have a problem with women, Democrats, and older people, but specifically women. And this is a major, major issue that if the political winds shift, we will be in the losing end of what's happening now. So if you look up there, crypto investors are indexed at 100%. The general public is not as excited about crypto, but somewhat excited, which is good. We see gold investors, bond investors are kind of looking into it. The next slide would be pretty telling, so let's scroll through. Baby boomers, Democrats, and especially when we look at women up there, major problems for our space, guys. So if we want any policy pushed, right now we're all celebrating because the Trump administration is extremely pro, and I love it. I've been in the space for 10 years. It's finally good to see a wind of change on the positive side, but we have major cracks that we need to solve and fill. And if we go to the next slide, please. And these are even more elucidated here. So from a Democratic perspective, older folks, as well as women, even independent, on the independent side, are very anti, or I should say less likely to invest, less likely to see us favorably. We're moving from a non-partisan issue pre-FTX to a fully partisan and even gender issue in the current environment. We cannot let this happen. And so I'd love to be able to work with the policy side as well as many projects in the space. Again, we do serious product work for Apple, for the iPhone launches, for Samsung's S phone launches, and so on and so forth on the non-crypto side. But within our space, Bitcoin specifically, as is getting adopted by TradFi, we need to solve this problem. And this is, I just want to say that while we're all celebrating, this is a real, near, and clear issue that we need to solve, and we can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, that wraps up the first part of our meeting. Now we're going to transition to our panel. So panelists, please come up. Mike, I'll turn the floor over to you. This is Mike Orcutt. He's a managing director of Project Glitch. So happy to partner with them. If you're not a subscriber to Project Glitch, highly encourage it. I tweet all about their newsletters that they just put out one. It was fantastic. So please subscribe, and let's move on to the panel. And just grab more coffee or food if you need to.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Morning, everyone. Happy PGP. My name is Mike Orcutt. Like Paul just said, I'm a founding editor of Project Glitch. We're a small team of journalists focused on the future of privacy, identity, and human expression online. We have a newsletter that you should subscribe to, projectglitch.xyz. We also curate event content like the conversation that we are about to have. Stablecoins are a really big topic, obviously. We're going to talk about a specific flavor of stablecoins that don't really exist yet, but all of the technical puzzle pieces to make them exist do exist. The title of this discussion is a technical and legal puzzle. We'll spend the next 30, 40 minutes talking about the pieces of this puzzle. The idea is if they're assembled, they can form a new kind of stable coin that's both confidential and compliant. Like I said, the technical capabilities to do this already exist. Practical zero knowledge cryptography that was pioneered by Zcash is now the basis of a growing class of privacy tools and protocols that make it possible to prove things about ourselves, like that our names are not on a sanctions list, without revealing any other identifying information. The missing pieces are mostly sort of legal and policy in nature. Some of those don't have anything to do really with privacy. They're more basic things that have to do with trust and accountability that Congress is discussing as we speak. Let's assume that those pieces sort of fall into place. Once they have, what's the best way to give stablecoin payments the same kind of privacy and confidentiality features that businesses have simply come to expect? And do the laws and policies aimed at managing illicit finance need to be updated to account for novel tools like ZK proofs? So before we dive in, that was a kind of a rambling intro. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Paul, do we have Andre? Oh, there he is. Okay, so on screen, we have Andre Omotansky, who's the general counsel at Aztec Labs. And on stage to my immediate right is Sina Kian, former chief legal officer and current advisor to the Elio Network Foundation, and Leslie Chavkin, global head of policy at Paxos. And so we are going to start with Andre. I'm going to do an around the horn, a little bit more detailed intro to get started. Can you tell us a bit more about your background, sort of what Aztec is and does, and how Aztec has been thinking about confidential stablecoins, Andre?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully you can hear me all. So my name is Andre. I'm the general counsel of Aztec Labs. My background is less fascinating than my current role. I was a TradFi lawyer for 10 years, based out of London. So I'm an English qualified lawyer with experience working between London, New York, Paris, and Hong Kong. And in my current role as general counsel of Aztec Labs, my main role is kind of shepherding the team and deploying Aztec. We are developing two things. So just to kind of hit on what Aztec is, Aztec is it will be a fully decentralized programmable privacy protocol on Ethereum as a layer 2. So we're developing Aztec, and we're also developing Noir, which is a open source programming language which enables anybody to write privacy preserving circuits without a PhD in cryptography. So that's not just limited to deploying applications on Aztec, but we see Noir being used in WorldCoin, Starknet, and also in traditional finance. As an open source software developer, our main goal is to kind of create this unique environment where you can create any type of privacy preserving payment architecture. So stablecoins are not the only thing we're focused on. And the genesis of our interest of why we actually started thinking about architecting payments stems back to a digital pound consultation, which we responded to in 2023. The digital pound There was a consultation in the UK whereby the Bank of England put out, some designs for a digital pound, and they requested feedback. We saw massive issues with privacy in the structure of CBDCs, and effectively identified a problem. And I think that problem also applies to stablecoins. The main problem we have seen is, you have a tendency for cash payments, which actually enable privacy, to be disappearing. So according to McKinsey and the World Bank studies, cash usage for payments has dropped globally from 35% in 2019 to around 16% in 2023. In the UK, cash usage fell 45% from 2015 to 14% in 2022, and that's accelerating. On the other hand, you have a decrease in privacy. On the other hand, you have an increase in payments such as CBDCs, which lack any privacy effectively. All bricks are piling to CBDCs. The digital yuan is growing exponentially. Transaction volume has quadrupled since 2023. The ECB will launch a digital euro in October this year. And then in addition, you have stablecoins, which are on the rise. And to quote US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, we are going to keep the US the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stablecoins to do that. So you have this kind of combination of decrease in privacy because of lack of, not available, ability to use cash anymore, and an increase in digital payment systems such as CBDCs and stablecoins, which unfortunately today don't offer the privacy that people, require. And one example of that is, payroll. You can't really, give employees comfort that their salary won't be known if everything is on Ethereum in its current form, or in any kind of current public system, employee data will be visible. And then also, people won't be able to set up businesses without fear of being persecuted, because people will know how much is somebody earning. So from our perspective, what we're building on Aztec, and similar to Alio as well, you can create better privacy preserving systems, and kind of, only make certain data available as and when. So that's kind of the problem that we've identified, and I think some of the systems that we're building will solve that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Sina, a similar question for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background, sort of what Alio is? I know it's similar to Aztec, but you may have a different framing on this, and sort of why you've thought so much about confidential stablecoins as a use case.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's kind of amazing to follow that lineup of speakers earlier. Just incredible cast. So my name is Sina Kian. I'm an advisor to the Alio Network Foundation, where I was previously chief legal officer. Before that, I worked in traditional finance. I'm really, really interested in private stablecoins. Alio is a layer one permissionless blockchain that's fully programmable, and powered by zero knowledge proofs. So just think like Ethereum, but with capacity for privacy. It's launched, it's live, it has Leo, the language, to support it. There are already applications being built on top of it. It's really, really incredible and exciting stuff. One of the most interesting applications, I believe, are private stablecoins, and for a very simple reason. I just think that there is a ceiling on the crypto space and on stablecoins if people's transactions cannot be kept at least somewhat confidential. I just don't see corporates moving to have their entire balance sheets be completely public to the entire world, to their competitors, to everyone. Generally speaking, just to take a very silly example, people who use Venmo, they opt for the private payment, not the public payment. That just gives you some indicia of where consumer demand is, where corporate demand is. So this has to be a product offering of the space in order to remove the current ceiling on the TAM. The good news is the technology is there. And with just a little bit of work on the policy side, I believe this will be unlocked. And before long, I think it will seem kind of silly that there was this time period where we were talking about stablecoins that did not have this kind of protection. Just as when you look back to the early stage of the internet, pre-encryption, pre-HTTPS seems like a little bit of a weird time period that obviously couldn't have lasted very long.
Thanks for that. Leslie, let's go to you. Curious your perspective on all this from where you sit at Paxos, which is a stablecoin issuer, obviously. It's clear why the privacy protocols are sort of excited about this and kind of see it as around the corner. But how does Paxos view sort of confidentiality and privacy? And do you have any thoughts, feedback to what Sina and Andre have said so far?
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Leslie Chavkin. I'm the global head of public policy for Paxos. If you're not familiar, we're the leading regulated blockchain and tokenization infrastructure platform. You may know us as a stablecoin issuer. We issue a number of US dollar stablecoin products, including PayPal USD, PYUSD. That's a white label stablecoin between Paxos and PayPal. And just by way of background, I spent a long time at the US Department of the Treasury before coming into the industry. I worked on AML CFT and sanctions policy. So I kind of come at this from the perspective of looking at that tension between AML CFT and privacy, which I think has come up a number of times today. So speaking from the perspective of a stablecoin issuer, the way we see it, I think very aligned with the other speakers here on the need for privacy. I think for us in this room, this is a sophisticated audience. We're able to articulate the need for privacy. Once you leave this room, the average consumer probably can't articulate it, but they know what they want, right? They want something similar to cash. In Venmo, they're opting for a private payment when they can, so they know it when they see it. And I think there is even a reasonable expectation of privacy and data privacy, even when you're using an electronic card payment, right? You're not expecting your transaction data to go to a third party. So that exists. As a big issuer, the way we look at it is right now we're still in the stage where we are really trying to drive and accelerate everyday adoption of stablecoins, whether that's by individual consumers, by enterprises that use stablecoins for money movement. That's where our focus is. We look at privacy as sort of the next evolution once there is greater adoption. And I think, as one of my panelists said here, there are the technical solutions in place already. So it's just a matter of building those on to the product once it's really taken off. The second point I would make on that is we are a regulated financial institution. So in the United States, Paxos is regulated by the New York Department of Financial Services. So whenever we think about these privacy solutions, we think about what will our regulators be comfortable, what comports with our regulatory obligations. And I think those solutions are there. Right now, there is some lack of clarity on the regulatory side about what is permissible, what is allowable. So I think there needs to be movement on that side. We hopefully will see it in some of the legislation that's forthcoming, but I think that is a big gray area for industry as well.
Thank you. I'm going to move back to Sina. I think one of the reasons we're talking about this is because the protocols like Aleo and Aztec, if I'm understanding correctly, sort of open the door to a wider range of possible designs in the realm of privacy and compliance. And so I'm wondering if you can take us through at a high level some of the different kinds of designs that are possible in the context of Aleo.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful way to frame it. There's two questions here. There's, can you comply with the laws as they currently exist? And then there's the question of what changes to the laws in light of this technology would be helpful for providing clarity. The answer to the first question is actually yes. And there are a variety of ways you can do it. I'm not saying all of them are good ideas, but there's a variety of ways. So for example, you can implement a whitelist where the only people using the network are permissioned and that they're compliant members. One place where that might, for example, be interesting is if you want to limit availability to accredited investors to comply with an offering that needs to comply with the securities laws. Then there's the concept of a blacklist. You can actually enforce a blacklist while maintaining privacy through a variety of mechanisms. You could, for example, have a zero knowledge proof based KYC in which you know that the user is not from, for example, a banned jurisdiction, but you don't need to see anything else about that user. So you can actually do it that way. You can also use the ZKPs to trace back a transaction to make sure that it never touched a banned transaction without knowing anything else other than the fact that it complies with, for example, a sanctions list. And then finally, this is what I alluded to earlier, you can just have an identity solution that's zero knowledge proof based, where you can authenticate what you need to authenticate about a user without having to see anything else about the transaction or the user's personal information. So think of it as, for example, you go to a venue, they check your ID. Once they see you're 21, they give you an orange bracelet. If you're not 21, you don't have an orange bracelet. Thereafter, nobody needs to ask you your date of birth or see a little plastic rectangle that also has your physical address and other information that's irrelevant to what they need to know. We can build the equivalent of that in the digital space. The technology is already there. And you can protect as much confidentiality as you want and need to comply with the laws as they currently exist without commenting on whether the laws as they currently exist should be the laws in 10 or 15 years.
Can you explain the concept of a view key really quickly? Also, this is not a new concept. It was, I think, pioneered, if I'm not mistaken, by Zcash, and I think is something that's available on Aztec as well. But it seems like an important concept here too.
Yeah, so many amazing things were pioneered by that Zcash team, and I think they deserve a lot of credit. The view keys concept is an amazing one. It's one where you can share view keys with, for example, a compliance team or a trusted third party or anyone you want to, where but only they can see the details of that transaction. And so in the compliance setting, you could imagine, look, the whole world can't see the transaction, right, if you're a corporate, but the view keys can be shared with, for example, a regulator or with a compliance team to ensure that certain attributes are met. That is a significantly less restrictive and more private solution than the status quo, which is broadcasting the entire thing.
I'm going to go back to Andre. Aztec makes the same sort of high-level designs possible as Sina described, correct? And the second part of that is that we discussed a concrete example of using a zero-knowledge proof of certain passport data. Wondering if you can run through that example, how that kind of a sanctions check works now, how it could work more confidentially, and any questions that might inspire in the context of current laws.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of second Sina, anything is possible currently on Alio, and will be possible on Aztec on Ethereum when it is launched. Again, to Leslie's point, as a regulated, for example, regulated financial institution like Paxos, you need to be able to kind of, automate certain checks potentially. So that programmable privacy primitive is possible on Alio today, and will be possible on Aztec on Ethereum in the future. Meaning, the developers have kind of full control and flexibility to develop and deploy applications in accordance with applicable laws. As to the sanctions check example, I mean, a very, very simple way of complying with the sanctions check today. There's many kind of tools available in the ZK space ecosystem. But for example, you can effectively open up a mobile application, like a proof of passport application on your web browser. You effectively take your passport, which has if you didn't know, it has a kind of a chip inside. Using NFC, the application extracts the relevant information from that chip. For example, your nationality and name, which is relevant for a sanctions check, and it generates a zero-knowledge proof that verifies those specific claims without kind of revealing the personal data. And combined with a smart contract integration, if an app, for example, requires that, if you're using a Paxos stablecoin app and that requires you to verify you're not on any sanctions list, you could use that proof of nationality and name to prove that your nationality is not from a kind of a blacklisted group of nationalities, countries, and your name is actually not on the SDN list as of that time and date, and you can do a kind of recurring check as and when you kind of do a transaction. So that's a very simple way of showcasing how a sanctions check would work in a programmable privacy system. That we've verified this, but as of today, that kind of proof of sanctions, proof of not being sanctions check, that proof itself is valid under Swiss and US laws, as I understand it. There are certain things, and I want to kind of maybe make it a bit spicy, in particular with KYC and data retention under UK law, which may not be possible to just get away with a proof of KYC check, and if you would want to have full privacy, in particular laws in the UK would need to change to just rely on a proof of passport check for KYC AML purposes. But for sanctions, a proof of passport check would suffice.
That's interesting, and I want to dig into a little bit more into the KYC example in a second. But first, I want to go back to Leslie, and I want to take a step back because we're getting kind of these things are exciting, and then they're fairly concrete the way that we're describing them, and we've been making the point a few times that the technical puzzle pieces are available. I'm wondering sort of what is coming to your mind in terms of on the legal side, and given your experience with regulators, how would you describe the missing pieces to the extent that there are any? Are there any sort of novel questions that are getting raised in your brain based on some of the things that are being said so far?
Yes, I'll answer that. But one thing that's probably worth noting too, to Sina's point earlier about the tooling being available and evolving very quickly, real time. So we issue our products, some of our products on the Solana blockchain. Solana does have an extension that allows for confidential transfers. So it withholds the amount that you are sending. That's not something that we have enabled on our products, but that kind of tooling is already out there. So just an important point to make. On the question about what is missing, I think it's less, I mean, there's certainly a lot of questions on the policy and regulatory side, but I think as an issuer, questions that come to mind around the privacy solutions are around the impact that they would have on things like scaling, transaction costs, on even just whether or not that makes it less user-friendly as a product. So this has been great, and it would be really helpful to hear from Sina and Andre about kind of how they think about those things with their designs.
Sina or Andre, have any response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the amazing things is the same tool that helps with privacy, which is the zero knowledge proof, actually helps with scaling. Because with Alio's network, the computations are done off chain, which takes the pressure off of the actual network itself and allows for like very significant scaling. So it could have been presented as this kind of complicated scaling tool. It just also has the benefit of being able to preserve privacy. And there's a whole range of design decisions anyone building on top of it could take advantage of to sort of implement that. But I actually think the killer use case for zero knowledge proofs as a layer one technology is stablecoins because of the actual demand for privacy on the ground. It's something that comes up. I think it was like one of the top comments in the EU when people were asked about their concern with stablecoins and CBDCs was privacy. Combined with the fact that the privacy solution is a scaling solution sort of in disguise. So there's real magic to be had there. I think what is fascinating about the space from a policy perspective is that typically there is a playbook. But if you are an issuer today, sort of thinking this through, you're making the playbook, which is, do you want to go with the whitelist approach, pretty restrictive? Do you want to go with the blacklist approach? How do you want to do KYC? I mean, there's no one you can call who will just say, hey, here's how everyone else has done it, because it's the first time it's really happening. But I think that's, from a law and policy perspective, it makes it much more interesting than, for example, like a commercial real estate transaction in New York, where like people know how that works.
Andre, you have anything to add?
No, I think one thing I would add is it's kind of there's a blank canvas where, as a stablecoin issuer or anybody thinking of building on top value or in the future on Aztec, you can do things which haven't been done before, and design them in various creative ways. So I think while stablecoins have been kind of growing quite rapidly and will continue to grow, I think there's exponential growth to be had if you incorporate these types of systems. And I think this will unlock, one of the interesting things about Aztec, it actually started to bring traditional finance on chain. And it was, quickly became apparent that you couldn't do that on Ethereum because everything is public. So the kind of design space here is incredible, and just the tip of the iceberg has been tested.
I want to dig further into the KYC example, which is more complicated than the sanctions check. And I want to go to Sina again, basically wondering if you can explain sort of what kind of a stablecoin transaction would necessitate the need for a KYC check in addition to a sanctions check. And if you just kind of give us your general thoughts on how KYC may need to evolve, both technically and legally, in order to bring these kinds of systems to fruition.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Leslie's voice on this would be incredible to hear as well.
Yeah.
Look, when we talk about KYC, I think we have to step back and ask what we're talking about. Typically, when people reference KYC in the US, they're referencing the Bank Secrecy Act, which puts, along with its regulations, a set of requirements on financial institutions, money transmitters, and others who fall within the relevant regulatory definitions. And the basic idea here, from a policy perspective, very high level, is to prevent money laundering, to prevent bad things from happening, so that the financial system cannot be used by bad guys in ways that sort of financial institutions turn a blind eye towards. So as a consumer, prior to crypto, the way you come across this is you go to open a bank account and they'll say, look, we need these 3 documents to prove who you are. And it's like, okay, your license and maybe your mortgage statement or something. And you typically go through it once and you don't really think about it again, and that's kind of it. And they know who you are, and then they can follow your transactions. And if something's showing up that requires a flag, that they'll investigate it, and hopefully that just doesn't hit your radar. In crypto, there's a different set of concerns that overlap with this, which is to say, all of a sudden, like if you go transact at Starbucks, like they're pretty confident that they don't need to worry so much about where your money came from and what you're doing, right? But in crypto, since these assets can travel across the world and in enormous sums, the same set of policy concerns are again implicated, and people are thinking through what, if any, KYC requirements need to be imposed on this entire sort of ecosystem, right? If you are a financial institution or if you're already a regulated party, it already applies to you. You have to have risk mitigation. You have to comply with the KYC AML rules as they're set out. And there's a lot of discretion in that, and there's a lot of risk aversion in that, because you don't want to be seen as sort of facilitating transactions with bad guys. So depending on where you fall in the ecosystem, which is like, if you think back to what Miles was showing, like it's a meme coin transaction, it's a DeFi transaction, it's a stable coin issuance, you're going to conclude different things about how these laws apply to you.
Andre, what is your view on all this? And obviously, KYC laws and regulations vary by jurisdiction, and you're in the UK. But to your mind, are there outstanding legal questions that are worth discussing?
Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. I think so. for example, there's Regulation 40 of the Money Laundering Regulations 2017 in the UK, for example, says that you must retain transaction records of certain copies of passports, driving licenses, and other information as part of KYC, which is applicable to regulated financial institutions. And I think the beauty of ZK is you can prove for example, of a certain nationality and that you have a valid driving license, or that you reside at a certain address without actually disclosing that data. And then having, I think, a viewing key for somebody to open that kimono down the line, I think, is not perfect. So in an ideal world, we would automate everything and we would have, proof of KYC at that point in time, where you just use a hash to prove that you've passed KYC, rather than kind of letting the information stay there and pending to be opened in a certain amount of time is not ideal. So I think, for a fully automated system, which I think would be more beneficial, in terms of cost, of compliance costs and everything, changing the laws so that a proof of KYC would satisfy these requirements would be more beneficial. And I say that not because I'm hopeful, but there's data to back up research where kind of existing kind of anti-money laundering policy intervention has less than kind of 0.1% impact on criminal finances. Compliance costs exceed, recovered criminal funds more than 100 times over. It's from the University of Melbourne La Trobe research. So having that automated and not having these kind of costs of retention of data could actually transform the financial system to be more effective, more efficient, and cheaper, and cheaper not only for the regulated financial institutions but for the taxpayers.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to go to Leslie now, and just to kind of wrap this up, actually, and have you bring us home. The recurring theme here has been that this sort of makes a lot of technical sense, and that there are the building blocks on the technical side to put this together, and that it's almost kind of seems simple to say it's just a matter of figuring it out on the policy side. But that obviously implies a ton of work politically and otherwise, legally. And so can you just kind of help us take a step back and understand some of these new and exciting ideas in the context of how policy gets made and how some of these legal things get worked out here in DC and in other capitals around the world?
Yes, I would say in terms of how the sausage gets made, there's a lot of, I would say, education that's still needed on how this technology works and is an enhancement, especially on the privacy side. It's shocking to me how many conversations we still have about the value of cash and why people prefer to use cash. So I think there's a lot more that can be done there on the education side. I will say something that's important and that we try to reinforce in our conversations with policymakers and regulators is that this is a big efficiency compared to the traditional financial system, where you have KYC at the beginning, but at every intermediary step that adds costs, it adds time, right? The fact that you could have a stablecoin transaction where it's happening at the beginning and then you have seamless movement of that stablecoin from then on is a huge improvement. You can save a lot of time, a lot of transaction costs in the process. So that, I think it's still a learning curve for us to be able to educate on that, but I'm very optimistic. And I think it's really exciting, the privacy tools that are becoming available. And I think it's less driven by what the policymakers say is clear, right? They're not coming up with the ideas. They are presented with the ideas, and then they shape the policy environment around that. So I think a lot of this will come from demand, from enterprises, from consumers, for what protections they want, and then the industry builds around that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. I hope the audience has enjoyed it. Hope everyone has learned something. I think we've taken it as far as we can today. Thank you so much to Sina, Leslie, and Andre for your thoughts. And make sure that you mark your calendars for the next meeting, which is on April 23rd. Thank you so much.
Okay, mic's back on. Thank you all for being here. Do me a favor, help us build this PGP for crypto community. If you enjoyed today, tell a friend, bring in some other experts, and let's make sure that we fill the room every time. I think this has been a special meeting. We have, of course, a summit tomorrow that I know a lot of you are going to be attending. So just great to see so many new faces here. Thank you for coming. Also, do me another favor and subscribe to a couple of things. Number one, the PGP for crypto YouTube channel. All the videos from today will be published there as soon as I can get to doing that. And also Project Glitch. So again, thank you for being here today. Hope you enjoy your time in DC if you're visiting, and everyone else, we'll see you next time. Take care.